In this video we're going to talk about the imaginary unit I, which represents negative numbers inside a radical. So this is part of a complex number, which we'll talk a little bit more about in another video. So the imaginary number I, or unit I, again, that comes from when we have negative numbers in a radical here. So we have square root of negative 20. If we think about how we can factor that out to simplify it, remember that we factor out perfect squares. So we can rewrite this as negative square root of negative 1 times 4 times 5, right? So if it was just square root of 20, we'd factor it to 4 and 5, because we know square root of 4 is 2. And we want to kind of factor out that negative as well, right? So we end up with 2 square root of negative 5, but if we type that into our calculator, just like if we type this in, we get an error, right? And that is because our calculator only works with real numbers, and this negative here, this negative 1, represents an imaginary number. So we use the letter, lowercase letter I, which represents the square root of negative 1. And so how we can make that a real number is if we take square root of negative 1 times square root of negative 1, well, that ends up being just negative 1, right? So if you square both of these, we get I squared equals negative 1. So both of these are really important to know, okay? So if we're, let's say, factoring out, or trying to factor this here, square root of negative 25. Well, if it was just square root of 25, I know that would be 5. But we have to factor out that negative 1, because square root of negative 1 represents I. So square root of negative 1 is I, square root of 25 is 5, and so we get 5I. That's how we would write that, okay? And we can always check our answer by squaring this, so 5I times 5I, 5 times 5 is 25, I times I is I squared is negative 1. So we end up with negative 25, and if we square this, we also get negative 25 because it cancels with the square root. So next videos we're going to talk a little bit more about the complex number when it includes this imaginary unit I.